On the Build Show today, we're talking about the differences between a common insulation, open cell foam and closed cell foam. Where would you use it? Where wouldn't you? And one burning question that I've got is, will either one of those soak up water? Let's get going. All right, so in the Build Show today, we're talking about the differences between open cell, that's what this big puff is right here, and closed cell. Now, if you've never handled these before, they're very different insulations. You know, open cell foam, typically a much lower R value, typically somewhere around 3.2, maybe as much as 3.5 per inch. And closed cell foam, much, much higher, usually somewhere between R6 and maybe as much as R7, depending on brands and manufacturers. This happens to be some Acela foam that came from my job site that we sprayed not too long ago. But I wanted to show you something that happens all the time with foam. You know, open cell foam, this is a lighter density foam than this, which is a high density foam. And on the job site, I've seen a lot of this happen to it, where someone pokes their finger into it. They want to see what it actually looks like. And you can poke your finger into that open cell foam, or you could drop your knife into it fairly easily. Now, closed cell foam, on the other hand, this is a high density foam. I don't know if you saw my other videos about this, but it can actually add structural strength to your house. Look at this, very, very rigid. No one's poking their fingers into this. And even if you try and put a knife into it, you can get it in. I've got a pretty sharp knife here, but you got to work at it. And it even holds the knife pretty well to get that knife out. So very different properties, even though they're both polyurethane spray foams. Now, where would you want to use one or the other, and how waterproof are they? Let's actually do a little test on that. Now, I started this test earlier where I've got some open cell foam and some closed cell foam, and I sprayed it into a kind of normal looking 2x4 stud bay. I shaved the open cell foam so that it would look like what it would normally like when it gets installed on the job site. And then closed cell foam, very hard to shave. Whenever you spray this, you're going to spray it not as deep as the cavity depth, so you don't have to do any shaving. Now, in the past, honestly, I've wrongly called open cell foam and said that it's sort of similar to a kitchen sponge. You know, a kitchen sponge, one beauty of a kitchen sponge is that it soaks up water pretty darn quickly. So here's a dry kitchen sponge, and look at that. You can see that foam just expand and soak it up. Now, on the other hand, I thought that the open cell foam was going to be pretty similar. And so I poured an entire bottle of this, all 16 ounces of just some blue dyed water on top of this. And we're at, gosh, a little over 30 minutes. And from what I can tell, it doesn't look like it's soaked in. Certainly nothing's dripped through to the bottom side. I don't think so. Nope, not yet. I'm going to leave this overnight and we'll see what happens with this. But closed cell foam, on the other hand, is known for, and I've used this analogy before, it's kind of like your coffee cup. You know, closed cell foam, very high R value. You can pour that boiling, Dunkin' Donuts coffee in there. And how thick is this wall? I don't know, 1/8 inch thick or so of this EPS foam. And it's not going to burn your hand. Your hand's at, what, 98 degrees? And that coffee's at 200 degrees. So you've got a 100-degree delta, and yet that foam does an amazing job of keeping that heat out. High density foam. Now, it's not exactly the same foam properties, but I think the analogy does hold for that. But the other big beauty of closed cell foam is this right here, waterproof. You're not going to see that water go through. And I'm actually going to leave both of these sit overnight, and we'll see what happens. Now, the open cell foam may not be as open as this kitchen sponge, but it is still open in some capacity of foam. For instance, when I was down in Houston after Hurricane Harvey doing some cleanup work, I was in a house that had open cell spray foam, and as I put my hand in that open cell spray foam to get it out, it was a kitchen sponge. It was saturated.
Awesome.
We got some open cell spray foam here. Look at this. Hang on one second, Randy. Let me see this.
Here's the other side, guys.
Look at
Oh
that.
my goodness.
Over there.
Careful.
We're going to have to pull this out. That's like something from Ghostbusters. Of course, that was 2 feet of water in the house. We'll see what happens with this, whether this soaks in. But the point here is you're going to use them in 2 different places. If you're in the southern U.S. and you're above grade, you can really use open cell foam just about anywhere. In fact, I've used it a lot on houses and to create kitchen conditioned attics. Beautiful product because it sticks, and because it expands, it fills all the gaps and voids. Closed cell foam, on the other hand, it's kind of the Lexus of insulation, very expensive, but it has some additional properties that I like waterproof, high R value, and it provides some structural rigidity. So if you're in the north, above grade, really you could use you could use closed cell foam anywhere. Now below grade's a different story. If you're doing crawl spaces, if you're doing basements, you don't want to use any open cell below grade. You always want to go with the closed cell below grade because of the possibility of water. If your foundation leaks, if you got a flood in your basement, you want that closed cell foam. If you're rebuilding after Hurricane Harvey, also great choice is to go with closed cell foam because it's not going to soak up that water. You could take the sheetrock and other cellulose-based products out that are damaged, throw those away, let the studs and the foam dry out, and you'd be good to go. You wouldn't have to respray anything. So what are the lessons learned here? Let's come back here tomorrow and see if anything's soaked in, and I'll wrap up the video then. All right, y'all, it's been almost 20 hours, and if you remember from yesterday, after 30 minutes, it was still totally pooled up in here. Now, almost a full day later, it's pretty dry on the top. You can see the remnants of where it was, and if you look at the underside of this thing, it didn't come out where I thought. I really thought we'd see a bunch of pools and drips and blueness in the middle here, but nothing there. And then and this is the open cell, just to remember. And then the closed cell one, if we come over next door here, we've got the closed cell, and again, nothing in the center here, but we've got some blue staining on this corner. Let me wipe this up. Now this blue one here, a bunch of these areas looks like nothing came through. We maybe have a little bit of evaporation, but that's it. So let's wipe this up here, and then I'm going to turn this up on its corner, and it looks to me like it actually, on both models, soaked through a little bit where the spray foam was in contact with the wood. But you know what else I want to do is actually, once I get this cleaned up, I actually want to slice these, kind of like a birthday cake, and see what the layers look like. I'm curious whether we're going to see any blue staining in the layers of either the closed cell foam, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see some in the open cell foam, but I'm not totally certain. It's interesting. I think this test is especially interesting because over the years I've had a lot of builders and a lot of people comment on my videos, hey, don't use closed cell foam in your rafters because you'll never know if you have a leak, whereas if you have open cell foam in your rafters, you know, up in your attic, sprayed up to the roof deck, you would know it if you have a leak. All right, yeah, look at that. I think that's pretty interesting. We are coming through here where the wood meets the spray foam in at least more than one place, but in the center here, nothing. Now this puff here looks like somebody stepped on it maybe at some point. And now let's flip this one over. Same thing. It looks like maybe it's soaked through just where the wood-to-wood connection was. I think this puddle in the corner here, actually the water soaked through where we had 2x4s meeting each other and we didn't have much spray foam. Over here, on the other hand, where we've got spray foam up against the wood and I puddled that, nothing on the back side of that. That looks perfect on this side. So I got my little handy Sawzall. Let's Sawzall these in two and see what we can find. Let's do the closed cell first. There we go. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that cross section there. Nothing, zero absorption on the closed cell foam. And in this corner here, you can clearly tell that wood was soaking through that corner. And so any small amount of water that made it through the closed cell was literally just a wood-to-wood connection. Where the spray foam was connecting to the wood, nothing. But in this corner here where the spray foam was light and kind of took a dip down in, we got a little bit through. So if this was a roof leak with closed cell, I think you'd have a really hard time knowing it. Let's do the same thing now to the open cell. Hopefully my battery will make it through this. I got a huge splinter. I'll be all right. It's like my testosterone levels are low and my battery's low. Low T. I need a screw gun. And then this will have enough power to make it through the foam, but I need to bzz, bzz. All right, I only had one battery on the Makita, So let's go to plan B, which is instead of Sawzall, we're going to take the screws out. Thanks for your patience. We're going to use the non-battery powered Sawzall method. Okay, here we go. Ah, yes, this is the cake batter results. Took me a while to get there, but look at this. We did soak through. It took a while. Remember, this was only 16 ounces of water. I'm going to put this back up on the table here so we can finish this video out. But look, it did soak through, guys. It took a while, you know, almost 20 hours. It didn't soak all the way through, and it seems like it mostly came through at joints or where the wood was coming together. Let's see if we can see this one over here. So like here, this puddle right here, it looks like it was coming down through the wood mostly. But you can definitely see it soaked in here, and this is wet. Look at this, see if you can zoom in on that. You can see the moisture in there. And when I was down in Houston doing some flood rehab work, we worked on a house that was all open cell. And when you put your hand in there, it was just sponge. It was crazy. So if this is left underwater, it certainly is going to soak up. But not the result I expected. You know, I put this on Instagram the other day, put a picture out and said, how long do you think? And I got like 50 responses. Almost everybody said, oh, it'll soak through within 30 seconds. And no, not the case at all. 30 minutes later, nothing. 20 hours later, it only made it through just a small layer on that open cell. What's the takeaways here? If you're using this on your roof, whether it's open or closed cell, you may or may not know you have a leak. If you have a small leak, I think that water is going to sit there and you may experience a lot of rot before you realize you have a leak, even with open cell. Whereas for years I've said, oh, you'll see that leak come through that open cell. It also depends on where the leak is and what happens and how much of your rafters are sprayed, of course. Eventually it will come through if you have enough water. Small amounts of water, I'm not sure you're necessarily going to see that leak coming through. So the takeaway for me has always been make sure that you put a really good underlayment in on top of your roofs. For instance, I use an ice and water shield on my roofs before I put spray foam in. And that way I can ensure that I'm not going to even have the smallest amount of leak, because I'm not sure that you've got a lot of drying potential when you've got spray foam up against the roof deck. So a standard, 15-pound tar paper, it's not going to cut it for me. You want to use a really good underlayment product, and a roof that does have a leak, you want to get that repaired quickly because it could lead to big rot and big damage later. Guys, thanks for joining me. Really interesting test here to see closed cell versus open cell. Let's summarize everything that we learned today. No matter what you're doing below grade, you want to use closed cell. It's not a place to use open cell. If you're in the hot, humid south, you can use open cell pretty much any place above grade safely. If you're in the northern climates, you really want to start thinking about using mostly closed cell in those houses. And if you're going to use open cell, you need to be cautious about where you use it and what you use it for. Both good products. I've used them both a lot over the years. Big thanks to Acela for sponsoring some past videos and for making these puffs for me. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.